Hey sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral?
What?
I can't believe my own sister wouldn't even come to our mother's funeral. You're so cold-hearted. It's awful, just awful. That's not something a decent person would do.
I was bewildered by the sudden phone call from my sister. That's because our mother had already passed away 3 years ago. We had a proper funeral. I didn't know what my sister was talking about. I'm married and working. I've been blessed with children. Since we both work, we make sure to give our children extra love and attention so they don't feel lonely. My husband is supportive in both housework and childcare, and I'm proud of our ideal family. I have a strong desire not to let my children experience the same things I did. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school due to my mother's affair. My father found out about the affair because I told him. Though it's often thought that children will always side with their mother, that wasn't the case for me. My mother was far from the ideal mother figure everyone imagines. I have no memories of being loved by her. I have one younger sister, but my mother only doted on her. It was as if even spending time on housework was a waste. So all the housework was left to me. It's more accurate to say it was forced on me. My mother despised me for revealing her affair and hated me more than ever. She constantly berated me for telling, and I was left with physical and emotional scars. When the divorce was finalized, she took my sister and left. Still, thanks to my father and grandparents, I maintained a relationship with my sister where we met regularly. But as I entered middle school, the number of times I saw my sister decreased. I thought it was an adult issue, but it seemed my sister was avoiding meeting me for some reason. I asked her if I had done something to upset her after being turned down a few times. According to my sister, our mother told her that our family falling apart was my fault. From my mother and sister's perspective, I was the traitor to the family. My sister said that if she kept meeting a traitor like me, she would be the next one to be abandoned. She couldn't bear to contact or meet me behind our mother's back anymore. She wanted me to stop. I explained that our mother was the one who betrayed us first by cheating on our father and causing our family to fall apart. My sister knew about our mother's affair. It's just that I was the one who told our father. Even though she understood, she still insisted that I was the traitor to her, as she had to live with our mother. She wouldn't listen, saying it was my fault for not being able to turn a blind eye. During all this, my father remarried. I got a new stepmother. At first, it was awkward, but my stepmother tried her best to be the ideal mother figure. Seeing her efforts, I decided to cherish my new family and stepmother. I stopped contacting my sister, and before I knew it, we had completely drifted apart. I had no lingering feelings for my biological mother, who only loved my sister. I was allowed to go to college and secured a job. Just when I thought I could finally repay my father and stepmother, my father passed away in an accident. Even though we had grown distant, I informed my sister that our father, who was still her father, had passed away. However, my sister did not offer any words of condolence. After saying, "Serves him right," she laughed scornfully. "Ha ha 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 ha!" I thought she would still come to the funeral, but my biological mother and sister never showed up. However, when we discussed my father's inheritance later, my biological mother and sister suddenly appeared. Everyone present was taken aback by their flashy and inappropriate attire and makeup. Their heavy makeup made them barely recognizable as the mother and sister I remembered. I was surprised that they both seemed to enjoy dressing so ostentatiously. "At least tell us the date for deciding the inheritance. We had to check every day because we didn't know when it would start." From the end of the funeral until today, my mother had been watching nearby, hoping to participate in the inheritance discussions. I think she should have just shown up at the funeral instead. That's because the inheritance discussion was scheduled for today, as soon as possible after the funeral. Because of what you said, my poor little daughter had to suffer. You're going to give us a fair amount, right? Even though they divorced and lived separately, the children still had the right to inherit. I had no intention of refusing that. In the first place, my father's personal assets were not so large that they could be distributed among the family. I can earn my own money by working, and my stepmother is still young enough to continue working. She seems to be planning to work for a while longer, so even if I gave my father's property to my biological mother, my stepmother wouldn't struggle financially. Besides, I didn't want any more disputes, so I gave up my claim to my father's inheritance. What a stupid man! He made such a fuss about a simple affair and wanted a divorce. I agreed to the divorce because being with such a small-minded man made my own heart narrow, too.
Yeah, it wasn't our dad who dumped Mom. It was Mom who dumped our stingy dad. Poor big sister for living with such a father. My mother insulted and ridiculed my deceased father. Laughing crudely, my sister joined in, disparaging my father as well. My sister even dissed me, saying it was pitiful that I was raised by a father who was dumped. Neither of them showed any empathy or understanding for the sadness and loss my father experienced after being betrayed. You can say whatever you want about me, but please don't speak ill of our deceased father. What? What's the traitor saying? You're the root of all evil.
That's right. And what's with that plain look?
You don't look like you're in your 20s. You look older than your mom.
With that appearance, you probably don't have a boyfriend, right? If you can't attract a man, what's the point of being a woman? If you don't think so, then you're full of flaws as a woman. After an intense argument, my mother and sister told me, "Never contact us again," and stormed out. I couldn't feel anger or disappointment towards my mother and sister, who wouldn't consider others' opinions and only insisted on their own. It was utter emptiness. In that moment, their existence was erased from my life. After they left, there was silence for a while, but someone coughed and snapped me back into reality. The inheritance was then divided solemnly. Years later, my stepmother inherited the house my father left, and I continued living there. I wasn't sure, but I believed she was thinking about me. Even though I was an adult, my stepmother tried to be a mother figure for me. Her support made me very happy. But then she became ill and was hospitalized. "I'm sorry I didn't ask you to live with me, just so you could take care of me." "I know, but even if we lived separately, I would have taken care of you if you were hospitalized, so don't worry." I visited the hospital to take care of my stepmother during breaks from work. I didn't want to have any regrets like I did when my father was ill. You could call it self-satisfaction. Her time was limited, so I wanted to spend as much of it with her as possible. One man supported me through all of this. Before my stepmother's illness was discovered, we had been discussing marriage, but right before we decided to get married, her illness was revealed. I asked to put the marriage on hold for a while, but my partner said it would be better to reassure my stepmother, and his presence became indispensable to me. At the right time, I introduced him to my stepmother. He told my stepmother, "I'm looking forward to living together with the three of us. He's a wonderful person. I have to make sure I see you in your wedding dress on behalf of your father, too." It seemed to be her greatest joy, and she lived longer than initially expected. But a few days after my wedding, she passed away, joining my father. My stepmother was wealthy, and I inherited a large amount of money. 3 years later, and with what my stepmother left behind, I was able to build a happy family. However, my husband and I decided from the beginning of our marriage that we would continue working and live within our means, not relying on the inheritance. Today, as always, I went to work and I received a phone call from an unknown number on my personal cell phone. I thought it was a sales call or something and didn't answer. Then it calls again and again by the minute. Maybe they're calling without realizing it's wrong. I answered at the end of the day and found it was my sister, who I had broken up with.
Finally! Why didn't you come?
What are you talking about?
How could you forget? Our mother's funeral, of course.
She seemed to be crying heavily. What are you talking about? Our mother's funeral was 3 years ago.
Huh?
She paused for a moment and then continued angrily.
Oh, maybe your stepmother died too. I'm talking about our real mother. And calling someone you're not even related to mother is disgusting.
I was irritated, but I ignored her attitude, realizing that losing her mother must have been a huge shock to my sister. To me, my real mother was my stepmother, who had married a man with a child and became a mother to a middle school student overnight. I didn't fully understand this until I had a family of my own, but I think the period of nurturing a life within oneself is a time for a mother to develop self-awareness and commitment. Of course, I am aware that many people can build wonderful family relationships, even without a blood connection, such as through adoption. However, becoming a mother to a middle schooler all of a sudden is certainly not an easy task, no matter how you think about it. When I consider the efforts and anxieties of my stepmother, all I can feel is gratitude. I am forever indebted to the stepmother who raised me, and she is the image of the mother I strive to be. Blood connections are trivial. In reality, the so-called real mother my sister refers to never even looked at me. So when I hear the word mother, I think of my stepmother who raised me, not my birth mother. I was not dumbfounded. I genuinely believed she was talking about my stepmother. Finally understanding my sister's words, I replied in a disinterested manner, "Oh, I see." I could hear what sounded like her banging or stomping on something over the phone.
What? That indifferent attitude? The funeral is over. It's terrible not to attend your own relative's funeral. What a cold-blooded person. You must not have red blood in you.
Although she made a valid point, my sister also didn't attend our relative's funeral. Moreover, our deceased father loved both my sister and me equally. I believe he was more affectionate than my mother. Not only did my birth mother and sister not attend my father's funeral, but they also snatched his inheritance and insulted and despised him. If you ask me, I think those two are the ones without red blood flowing in them. Indifferent. Well, we are strangers, aren't we?
Huh?
You interfered with the inheritance even though you didn't attend Dad's funeral, right? Weren't you the one who said never to contact you again? And I just found out about our mother's passing now, you know? After a brief silence, my sister uttered a small,
"Ah, I forgot. I meant to inform you about the funeral."
Well, I'm glad you remembered. I'm going to renounce all the inheritance related to that mother, so you can do whatever you want with it. I said just that and hung up the phone. However, my sister, perhaps lacking comprehension, contacted me again a few days later.
"Help me, Katie. It seems our mother hinted at marriage to various men. Isn't that like marriage fraud? They're yelling at me to pay compensation if I don't want to be sued. I'm being yelled at a lot."
Well, just pay them.
"If I could, I wouldn't be calling you. Didn't you hear me say various men? It's not just one or two. Some of them seem pretty sketchy, too."
That's tough. But remember, you were the one who said never to contact you again. Furthermore, it should have been known that our mother was promiscuous with men, since she cheated on our father while he was still alive. In fact, she didn't have just one affair. If it had been only one person, our father might have forgiven her, thinking it was just a momentary lapse of judgment. Only our father would know the truth. There might be a possibility that I couldn't accept my mother, who had multiple relationships, as a mother. That's because my father tried to adopt my sister several times through a lawyer. But I was told that my sister didn't want to leave, so I gave up on that idea. My sister wanted to stay with our irresponsible mother, even though she saw her up close. Even if our mother had imprinted on her, my sister still wanted to be with her. twisting the memories we both shared. It's fair to say that not being able to leave even after becoming an adult is equally guilty. There's no room for sympathy here.
Well, that's...
And you're the one who called me a traitor all along. I don't need a sister who calls me a traitor. You're the one who declared us strangers first. I don't need you coming around now acting all like family. It's a nuisance. Don't ever contact me again. We're strangers after all. I hung up the phone without checking my sister's reaction. I blocked her number and went back to the house where my family was waiting. Later, I received a call from my biological mother's relatives. I thought we were done, but they apologized for the rudeness my mother and sister had shown me, so I decided to hear them out. The relatives remembered how harshly my mom treated me and were shocked that she could shamelessly claim my father's inheritance after we had separated. They apologized profusely for allowing the visit during a time when my grief had not yet healed. But that's all in the past now. Next, they talked about my sister. Apparently, she's just as irresponsible with men as our mother. Ever since my sister came back, they had warned her numerous times that she would eventually suffer if she didn't change her ways. But instead of changing, my sister became just like our mother, and they could no longer control her. Our mother got involved with bad men, and my sister was being forced into criminal activities, feeling cornered. My sister was also dating multiple men at the same time, leading to several intense confrontations. Unable to handle it anymore, the relatives declared that they would cut off their relationship if their advice wasn't heeded, and then our mother died. As my sister is an adult, they decided to continue with cutting off the relationship. But right after our mother's funeral, another confrontation occurred. Since then, her whereabouts have been unknown. They advised me not to get involved with her anymore. I didn't plan on it anyway. However, I can't help but feel sorry for her, as there might be some room for sympathy regarding the criminal activities she was forced into. But there must have been a way for her to atone. If she didn't take that path, then I guess it's her own fault. That's what I decided to think. After hanging up the phone, I heard the sound of my husband and children laughing happily in another room. I want to protect this family. So I decided to live my life, using my biological mother and sister as negative examples.